Finally, after a week and a half of clouds and rain, it's clear tonight. So I've taken out my Dobsonian and we're going to see what we can see in a Dobsonian telescope. Hello, I'm Tsula, host of Tsula's Big Adventures, and this episode is about what you can see in your Dobsonian telescope. I'm making this video at the request of one of the viewers, Raymar. Sorry it's taken me so long. Dobsonian telescopes were invented by a monk in San Francisco named John Dobson, and he learned how to grind his own mirrors for a Newtonian reflector, and he would use port windows from World War II ships that were abundant in San Francisco at that time. And he would make his own mirrors for a Newtonian reflector, and then he would put them in cheap tubes, sometimes just cardboard. And he would place the tube in a simple rocker base like this, or daisy wheel, that just goes up and down and left and right. His friends encouraged John Dobson to patent his idea, but he wasn't interested in that. He wanted to bring amateur astronomy to the general public, and that's what he did. He taught classes on how to grind a mirror for a Newtonian reflector, and he would set up his telescopes on the sidewalks of San Francisco and let strangers look through them. He did a lot to popularize amateur astronomy, and now almost every telescope company carries a telescope that's in a Dobsonian style. Dobsonians are the type of telescope most often recommended for beginners. And the reason is that the telescopes are very cheap compared to other types of telescopes. You get a lot of aperture, size of the primary mirror, for not very much money. For example, a 6-inch or 150 millimeter Skywatcher Dobsonian is only $390. The Orion Star Blast 4.5-inch or 115 millimeter telescope is $320. And that's not much money for that much aperture. And Dobsonians don't require learning how to polar align, and they're very easy to use and set up, and when you use it you have to learn the sky. You have to find everything yourself, and so that makes you learn the sky, and it's very easy to assemble. When it comes in the mail, you just put the base together and put the tube on there, and that's about it. And for all of those reasons, Dobsonian is the most recommended telescope for a beginner. I think all amateur astronomers should own a Dobsonian telescope. Before you get started, you need to make sure your Dobsonian is well collimated. All Newtonian reflectors need to be collimated from time to time. The other thing is that Dobsonians, since the mirror is at the back, take a long time to cool down, so be sure to give it plenty of time to cool down. After you're done collimating, then take out your collimation cap and put it in a safe place, because you do need to check it from time to time. Put your eyepiece back in. Next, you need to line up your finder scope or your red dot finder with your telescope. So point it at a distant object, and it helps to have an eyepiece with crosshairs, and get it dead center, and then look through your finder scope and make adjustments to these screws until it's in the center of the finder scope or your red dot finder, or both. Then once those are lined up and it's cooled down, you're all ready to start. Now, one thing you might want for your Dobsonian is one of these. This is a coma corrector. All Newtonian reflectors suffer from coma, which is where the stars on the perimeter of what you're seeing through your eyepiece look like tadpoles or kind of curved, and this will eliminate that. So you might want to think about investing in a coma corrector, but it's not necessary. Now we're all ready and waiting for darkness to fall. It's the end of spring and beginning of summer, so I've chosen some objects visible in late spring and early summer. And one reason I've taken so long to make this video is that what you can see in your Dobsonian depends on the size of the aperture of your primary mirror of your Dobsonian. To learn more about factors that affect what you can see in your telescope, you can see my video on factors affecting what you can see in your telescope, and I'll put the link below. My Dobsonian has a 10-inch aperture, but I think that the classic size of a Dobsonian is 6 inches or 150 millimeters. My 10-inch Dobsonian has almost 3 times as much light gathering power as a 6-inch Dobsonian telescope. So I can see far more in my 10-inch Dobsonian than in a 6-inch Dobsonian. And you can even get little tabletop Dobsonians that are only 4.5 inches. And my Dobsonian can gather over 4 times as much light as a 4.5-inch Dobsonian telescope can. So really, what you can see in your Dobsonian is very much a function of the aperture of your telescope, regardless of whether it's a Dobsonian, a refractor, or a catadioptric telescope. However, I've selected some objects to view with my Dobsonian that you should be able to see in a 6-inch Dobsonian and even in a 4.5-inch Dobsonian. The objects I've selected are mostly deep sky objects, because deep sky objects are what Dobsonian telescopes excel at, much more so than the planets. While you do want the biggest aperture telescope you have to view the planets, you also want a telescope that can get a high magnification, and that requires a long focal length. For that reason, catadioptric telescopes tend to be better for viewing the planets. Either a Schmidt-Cassegrain or a Maksutov-Cassegrain telescope, they're better for the planets than a Dobsonian. But for deep sky objects, the preferred telescope would be a Dobsonian. So, other than Venus, we won't be looking at any planets. Well, there aren't any to look at anyway. And Venus can be viewed with even a pair of binoculars. But all the other objects are galaxies, globular clusters, nebulae, and a couple of double stars. Double stars require telescopes that have enough resolving power to split the double stars or resolve them into their component parts. And resolving power is solely a function of the aperture of your telescope. But you should be able to split all the double stars that I've selected. One more thing I want to mention before we get started is expectations. You can see a lot with a 6-inch telescope, but your expectations should be reasonable. What you will see will not resemble in any way the photographs you may have seen of any of the objects I've selected. Those photographs are very long exposures of minutes at a time, and there are many of them all stacked together in special software to bring out details not visible to the human eye. So depending on the size of the aperture of your telescope, the things that you see might just be dust balls. There's nothing wrong with that. And part of the thrill is finding each object, and also the thrill of even seeing these objects at all with your own eyes. Objects that are so incredibly far away that it's spectacular that we can even see them. Also, regarding colors, you probably won't see much color. Not for galaxies anyway, and maybe not for nebulae either, unless you have a very large aperture telescope, in which case you may see some colors, blue or green or gray. And double stars, you'll definitely see colors, but nothing like the astrophotos that you may have seen on the internet or on YouTube. So keep that in mind, and just enjoy the thrill of seeing other galaxies that are light years away. And nebulae, where stars are born, and beautiful double stars. Okay, enough lecturing. Let's get started. Okay, I'm looking at Venus. It looks like a round of cheese that somebody took a bite out of. And it's very cool. And you don't need a telescope nearly this big to see the phases of Venus. And I have a 24 millimeter eyepiece in, so not very high magnification to see the phases of Venus. Mars is available. It's next to Venus. This is a very pretty lineup of the crescent moon, Venus, and Mars is to the left and above a little bit. Very pretty, but Mars is pretty far away from us, and it won't look like much in the Dobsonian. Okay, I'm looking at Mars. As you can see, it's not very dark. It's 10:30. And I'm looking at Mars, and it's very small. I cannot make out any detail, and it's not the fault of this Dobsonian. It's just far away from us, and Mars is hard unless it's at opposition. So I'm not going to sketch it. I'll sketch Venus, but I'm not going to sketch Mars because it'll just look like an orange dot. So now we're going to look at M65, M66, and NGC 3628. Those are 3 galaxies found in Leo the Lion, known as the Leo triplet. And it's pretty easy to find. You find Regulus, the brightest star in the backward question mark, or Sickle, the asterism in Leo. And behind Regulus is another bright star, the nebula. And then there are 2 dimmer stars between Regulus and the nebula. And those 2 stars are Iota and Chertan. And M65 is in between Iota and Chertan. And Iota and Chertan make a triangle with the nebula. So that's how you find it. So I'm going to point my telescope. I'm going to turn that light off to look for it. Be right back. Ugh, look at this dew on my telescope. It's terrible. I got them in the telescope. M65 is the brightest, and it's kind of roundish. M66 is a little more elongated, and below those 2 is the line. That's NGC 3628. It's more like pencil shape, but pretty easy to find. Better to look a little earlier in spring than now. It's pretty low, and it doesn't get dark till late, and Leo's going to set. But that's an easy one to find and a good one for your Dobsonian. So let's go to the next object. Next, we're going to look at some more galaxies, M60 to M90, in the Virgo cluster of galaxies, also known as Markarian's chain. And to find it, we're going to go to the nebula, the tail of the lion that we just looked at. And we're going to find Arcturus, go to the handle of the Big Dipper, and from there you arc to Arcturus, and then you go down, you speed to Spica. Spica, Arcturus, and the nebula make an equilateral triangle, and we're going to start there. Once you've found those, we need to look for a star in Virgo, because these are in Virgo, these galaxies, to look for a star called Venatici. Venatici is a 3rd magnitude star, and it'll be inside that equilateral triangle. You'll be able to see it. And once you find Venatici, get that in your finder scope. And once you have it in your finder scope, you're not going to be able to see the galaxy in your finder scope, but you just want to get Venatici in there, and then you're going to move your telescope about 4 degrees toward the nebula and north a little bit, and you should come to M60, the first of the galaxies, and then you'll be able to go from that galaxy to the other ones all the way to M90. So I'll be right back while I dark adapt again and get Venatici in there, and then M60. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Venatici is about halfway between the nebula and Arcturus, but lower, if that helps. And if you get it in the finder scope and put Venatici in the lower left-hand corner, you might have M60 in the top corner of the telescope, if that helps. And then from M60, which probably the brightest one, I think. It looks like a bright spot in the middle with the oval-shaped patch around it. Then you go about another 3 degrees toward the nebula to get to M59. which is dimmer. And then from there, you keep moving towards the nebula to M58. And then you keep going, and next you'll come to M89, which is this is still a little bit dimmer than M60. And then lastly to M90, which is fairly bright patch. And those are all part of Markarian's chain. And they're all in the Virgo cluster of galaxies. Now we'll look for another galaxy, M64, the Black Eye Galaxy in Coma Berenices. To find the Black Eye Galaxy, what you want to do is find Arcturus, and then you'll see a star near it, Mufrid. And once you find Mufrid, head towards Venatici, and you'll see a 4th magnitude star, and that's Alpha Coma Berenices. Put Alpha Coma Berenices in your finder scope in the southeast corner of the finder, and in the northwest corner should be an almost bright star, 35 Coma Berenices. Move the finder to center that, and you'll see a 6th and 7th magnitude star nearby, and that's what you want to aim for because the galaxy is near the 7th magnitude star. Okay, I'm going to turn the light off and get dark adapted again and get it in my telescope. The Black Eye Galaxy, you find Arcturus, and that star below it is Mufrid, and you keep going south to, that's Venatici. In the lower part of the screen and above it, in the center of the screen, is Alpha Coma Berenices. And then the Black Eye Galaxy is going towards Malat 111. And that's about all I can show you on here because it's hard to find, I'm not going to lie. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. That is hard as hell to find M64, the Black Eye Galaxy. I'd say it took me 30 minutes. When I went in the house to get my eyes dark adapted and to warm up, I looked at the temperature and it's 36 degrees. It's the summer solstice, for God's sake. My God, it's so cold out here. Anyway, it's very cool. If you couldn't find it, I completely understand. You should be able to find M53, though, the globular cluster, because it's just 1 degree away from the alpha star. But the Black Eye Galaxy, my God, was it hard to find, but very cool galaxy. Now let's find something easy. Cor Caroli, beautiful double star. You just find Alkaid, the last star in the handle of the Big Dipper, and go south. The blue star is magnitude 2.8. I was going to say 3. And the yellow star is magnitude 5.5. It's a beautiful double star and easy to find. Find M3. Next thing we're going to look for. Go to the Big Dipper, to the handle, Alkaid, and from there, to Arcturus. That bright star in the center of the screen. M3 is in between Arcturus and Cor Caroli. Cor Caroli is the double star that was just below Alkaid. That star in the middle. So that's where we're going to look. Cor Caroli's on the right-hand side of the screen in the center, and Arcturus is on the left-hand side of the screen in the center. And in between there is where we'll find M3. Okay, you should have been able to find M3. Beautiful globular cluster and Canis Venatici. And I had a hard time finding it, but that's because my finder scope is got dew on it. So I can only use the red dot finder. Not only is it 35 degrees, but the humidity is 77%. So conditions are not ideal, but I've had cloudy for a week and a half, so I'm going to keep going. For our next object, we're going to look at a double star in Boötes, Azar. Or it's a multiple star system, but just find Arcturus and then go north to another fairly bright star, the next one, and that will be Izar. And then may not be able to see that it's a double star at the lowest magnification, so raise your magnification until you can split it. So there's Arcturus, the bright star in the middle of the screen, and just go north, and that star in the center of the screen is Izar. So for everything else we've looked at tonight, I had been using this Teleview 24mm panoptic, but I couldn't split Izar, so I put in this 9mm, but the seeing is horrific. It's just awful, but I could split it. Tonight they both looked white, and one of them is smaller, but I was able to split it. Now let's go to the next object, which is a spectacular globular cluster, the most spectacular globular cluster in the night sky, M13, the Hercules cluster, also known as the Keystone cluster. It's in Hercules, and it's easy to find. You just find the keystone, or the trapezoid, that makes up Hercules, and in between the top of that trapezoid is M13. It's closer to the one on the left, and it's going to be high in the sky this time of year. So let's have a look at M13. Alrighty, I have M13 in here. It's spectacular, but it's going to look even better with this 9mm. It's very easy to find. Almost as easy as Izar. And so let me turn this light off and enjoy the Hercules cluster for a moment before we go to our next target. To find M5, you go to Corona Borealis, the semicircle, and go below that, and that will be Serpens Caput. And the brightest star in Serpens Caput is Nuclei, and M5 will be about 4.5 degrees southwest of Nuclei. That's how you find it. Well, it's not quite as spectacular as M13, but it's a beautiful object for the Dobsonian, and it's spectacular. Next, we're going to look at a beautiful double star in Hercules, Rasalgethi. It's the brightest star in Hercules, and it's also going to be high in the sky. And if you can see the Milky Way, you want to go down towards the Milky Way, and it's very close to the alpha star of Ophiuchus. So head southwest until you see the brightest star of Hercules, and that's Rasalgethi. Rasalgethi is not as bright as the alpha star of Ophiuchus, so I hope you got on the right one. And as with most double stars, you'll need to increase your magnification. So I put in my 9mm, and I was able to split it and see the color in it. And it, to me, is red and green. What color is it to you? Well, whatever color it is, it's beautiful. Now let's go to a double star in Lyra the Harp, Epsilon Lyrae, the famous double-double. Any telescope will show you the two stars, but the trick is to split those two stars into two more stars. So let's find it. It's close to Vega, the brightest star in Lyra, and the star that Jodie Foster went to in the movie Contact. It's very late. It's 2:30, and so Lyra is way overhead, and I had to get on my hands and knees to get it in the red dot finder, but I got the two stars in there. So now go to a higher magnification until you split those two stars into 2 stars. And if whatever magnification you go to doesn't split it, then go to a higher magnification. But you should be able to split it with your Dobsonian. I mean, they're tough. They're close pairs, but you should be able to split it. I was able to split it with this 9mm. Pretty neat, huh? Next, we're going to go to something else in Lyra nearby, the famous Ring Nebula M57. It's a planetary nebula in Lyra. Underneath Vega is a parallelogram, and you want to go to the lower set of 2 stars, and M57 is in between those 2 stars. So let's find Lyra. Go back to your low magnification. Okay, I got the Ring Nebula in there, and it's not real clear. I've seen it better. I'm going to see if I can see it a little better with the higher magnification. But I can see a little bit of blue. Can you see some blue in it? Okay, that looks a little better. So try a little bit higher magnification and see if that helps. Okay, next we're going to go to the Lagoon Nebula M8. Beautiful nebula that has a star cluster inside of it in Sagittarius. Okay, I'll be right back. Wow, it's spectacular. I just love it. To find it, find Caus Borealis, which is the top of the teapot, or the peak of the roof of the house, and just go east about a fist length, and you should be able to see it if you don't get stuck looking at a bunch of other star clusters on the way. It's just beautiful. Spend a little time there before we go to our next 2 stops. Oh boy, I've been going on and on about NGC 6826, the planetary nebula in Cygnus, blinking planetary nebula, and M57 maybe, I'm not sure, and M27, the dumbbell nebula in Vulpecula. And then it turned out it's so darn cold out here that my microphone battery died a long time ago, so there's no audio. I have to cut all that. So I think it's a pretty long video anyway, so let's end on the Lagoon Nebula. That's an excellent object for a Dobsonian telescope. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Until then, get outside and enjoy the night sky. Dark skies forever. Tsula signing off.